Hello and welcome back to another episode of Hey, Have You Seen That Film? Today we'll be discussing one of the lost films of the 80s, The Burbs, which a few of you might have heard of, and that's great if you have. If you haven't, you're missing out. The Burbs came out in 1989, starring Tom Hanks and Carrie Fisher as his wife. The story is about a man who is taking time off from work to just relax and doesn't know what he wants to do. In his neighborhood, his little cul-de-sac he lives in, there's a whole cast of crazy characters, but one of the neighbors nobody knows much about, the Klopeks. They've recently moved in and the house has kind of just started to fall apart and nobody knows anything about them. So a lot of the neighbors start to become suspicious, especially when one night the Klopeks drive their car out, take a big black sack, throw it into the garbage, and then smash it in there and drive back into the garage. So the neighborhood starts to become suspicious and starts to try to figure out what's going on, who are the Klopeks, and they even think at one point they might have taken one of their neighbors and killed them. So the neighborhood is coming together. You got Tom Hanks, you got his weird next door neighbor Art, you have Bruce Dern, who plays a Vietnam vet who is a colonel or something like that, and I think he's really funny in this film. You got Corey Feldman in it, who plays Mouth in The Goonies as just a punk rock teenager in the neighborhood. It's a really funny movie. I think what's so great about it is it's quirky. It's not. I almost look at it. It feels like it's a little bit of a spoof on Rear Window. If you know what Rear Window is, Alfred Hitchcock. James Stewart, the man stuck in his wheelchair, uses a camera because he thinks one of his apartment neighbors has killed his wife. This film feels a little bit like it's a spoof of that because this neighborhood's coming together to try and figure out what's going on at this house, and they think that they might have killed one of their neighbors. It's also got, it's just, quirky's the best way to put it. I mean, there's this whole dream sequence that Tom Hanks has, and he's being sacrificed by the Klopeks. Besides the quirkiness, which works well for this movie, I think what's really great is the cast for the neighborhood. Like I said, it's a bunch of different crazy, quirky characters, and they really work well together in each of the role that they play. There's a funny scene where Carrie Fisher's character is tired of Tom Hanks going out and getting into these and coming up with these crazy ideas about the neighbors. And Bruce Dern and the neighbor Art both come up and they want Tom Hanks to come out and help them check something out, and she's telling him, she comes up out of nowhere and she's like, no, go away. And suddenly these two grown men become like little boys and like, please, Carol, can he come out? And that scene always makes me laugh. What I also enjoy about this film is it's just got that 80s feel to it. The 80s had a lot of interesting films, you can put it that way. I feel like in the 80s they kind of explored a lot more with different ideas that they had. There's other films such as Better Off Dead, starring John Cusack, which again is another quirky kind of weird movie, but it's got that 80s feel to it. A lot of 80s comedies, I feel like they had more of a wide range, and they could kind of just go with these crazy, weird ideas. Like Weekend at Bernie's, that's another another example of one that's just, they just had this crazy idea and they kind of just went with it. So to me, that's what makes the era of the 80s fun to watch the films in it, because some of them are just weird. The Burbs is weird, but it's funny, and you just kind of, you look back at it and like, wow, that was funny, that was different, but all right. I also like it as well because I think Tom Hanks is a great actor, and this is a role of his where he's just a little, well, I wouldn't say different. Tom Hanks has played a lot of different characters, from comedic to serious, and this is definitely one of his more comedic roles where he's trying, it's almost like he's a mixture of his, just a normal character, but he's funny, and so I enjoy watching Tom Hanks' acting ability, because I think he's a great actor. He's able to act. You give him a script and he will do his best. And you can say about any actor, but Tom Hanks it's Tom Hanks. So, yeah, I think The Burbs is a great film. It was one of the last, it came out in 1989, so it was one of the last, it was the last year of the 80s before we moved into the 90s, and the 90s still had the films in the beginning still felt like the 80s, but I would definitely recommend this to anybody. When I first saw it, I kind of just watched it on the spur of the moment. I was just kind of looking through, I think it was on Hulu, and I was like, oh, Tom Hanks, the 80s, let's go for it. And I loved it. I remember shortly after I watched it, I went and showed it to one of my sisters, and then I showed it to my brother and his wife, and then I showed it to my wife when we got married. If you like mystery films, if you like comedy, if you like Tom Hanks, if you want to see Carrie Fisher in more than just Star Wars, watch The Burbs. It's, you might have to be in the right mood. It depends on your style of humor. I know, like, my mom isn't particularly crazy about this movie. She doesn't think it's funny. But, you know, check it out. You never know until you see it, right? So again, the movie is The Burbs, 1989. And I think it's hilarious. Go check it out.